Near a clutch of snake eggs, one egg's not like the others. What's inside isn't another snake that needs time to hatch, grow stronger, and start hunting. By the time this creature emerges, it'll already be fully formed and capable of surviving on its own. Eventually, the young snakes begin to hatch and crawl out into the world, but the strange egg remains untouched, waiting for its moment. Then, sometime later, cracks begin to spread across its shell, and out comes a predator that's ready to kill almost immediately. And from that point on, all that remains is to let nature do what it does best. The idea of using one predator to control a dangerous snake population is nothing new in Japan. In 1910, small Indian mongooses were deliberately introduced to Okinawa. They were released in the southern part of the island in the hope that they would prey on the native habu snakes and rats that were damaging sugarcane plantations. But the mongooses established themselves and gradually spread northward. By the 1990s, they'd reached the forests of Yambaru, an area home to many rare native species that had evolved with little exposure to predators like these. In the end, in 2000, Okinawan authorities launched a large-scale campaign to deal with the mongooses. Thousands of animals were captured, traps were set across the island, and efforts were made to stop them from spreading farther north. The campaign continued for more than 2 decades. But what happens now? After what happened with the mongooses, nobody wants to repeat the same experiment, so this time the plan isn't to simply release another predator into the wild and hope for the best. Instead, the idea is to target the egg clutches. The problem is that destroying the Taiwanese habu's eggs directly isn't always practical either. The snakes often hide their eggs deep inside crevices, and reaching the entire clutch can mean pulling apart rocks or opening up a hiding place that would be better left undisturbed. But the new project doesn't actually require that. As long as there's even limited access to the eggs, researchers can place a single foreign egg inside. They push it deep enough into the cavity, leave it next to the habu clutch, and seal the opening again. And the foreign egg isn't placed with the habu eggs right away. It's first kept in an incubator and moved into the nest only shortly before it's due to hatch. The timing is carefully adjusted so that all the hatchlings emerge at roughly the same time. And when that moment comes, what hatches from the extra egg is a young monitor lizard, a predatory lizard capable of hunting small reptiles, including young snakes. The species used for the project is chosen very carefully. The monitor has to be large and active enough soon after hatching to take on newly hatched habu. At the same time, it needs to be poorly adapted to prolonged cold weather, giving it little chance of establishing a permanent population on the island. On paper, the plan looks almost perfect. During the summer, the young monitor emerges with a ready-made food source right where it hatches. It then begins hunting around the nest and gradually spreads into the surrounding area. And once the colder season arrives, most of the released animals are expected to die off naturally, without the need for another decades-long trapping campaign. Cheap and convenient. The early results are so impressive that the approach quickly moves beyond the experimental stage. After a successful first season, the government orders thousands more of these living capsules. Finding suppliers isn't difficult. Many species of monitor lizards live in neighboring parts of Asia, and the animals have long been bred in captivity. Breeding facilities begin receiving large government orders specifically for fertilized eggs of the required species. The eggs are shipped in batches to Okinawa, placed in incubators, and then distributed among the teams. At first, everything works exactly as planned. The young monitor lizards hatch at almost the same time as the habu, kill newborn snakes, and quickly begin spreading on their own. But once they venture out of their hiding places, they discover much easier prey: rats. There are especially large numbers of them around drainage systems, garbage collection areas, and outbuildings. In the release areas, both young habu and rodents begin to decline at the same time. Officials are quick to notice the added benefit. One imported predator is solving 2 problems at once. Convenient. So the authorities gradually deviate from the original plan. The monitor lizards are no longer seen as animals that are supposed to complete their mission and die off by winter. Instead, they're deliberately allowed to survive and spread farther. But it doesn't take long for the monitors to discover prey even better than rats. one that lives in chicken coops. Why chase a rodent through a drainage ditch when the birds are trapped inside a confined space? Chicks can barely defend themselves, and eggs don't run away at all. At first, the attacks happened near the same settlements where the monitor lizards were released to control rats. Then, farmers began regularly finding smashed eggs and dead poultry. They're the first to demand that the experiment be stopped and that the government's weapon be captured. For now, the authorities are in no hurry. According to the original calculations, the problem's supposed to solve itself. The chosen species doesn't tolerate cold weather well, which means that once winter arrives, most of the monitor lizards should simply die off. Farmers are told to simply wait a few months. No one plans to launch a large-scale trapping campaign for animals that are expected to die off on their own anyway. Instead, the authorities came up with a cheaper solution. Monitor lizards caught by farmers near chicken coops are no longer killed. They're relocated to places where their presence is considered useful. And there's no shortage of those places: landfills, warehouses, and other facilities where rat populations are especially high. For local governments, everything seems perfect once again. Farmers get rid of a predator, sanitation crews get a free rat catcher, and the government doesn't have to launch a dedicated effort to capture and destroy the animals. The project takes another step away from its original concept. An animal that was never supposed to be released into the wild in the first place is now being deliberately moved around the island, specifically to places where food and shelter are constantly available nearby. But then winter arrives and the project's main safeguard fails. The season turns out to be much milder than expected. There are almost no hard freezes and barely any snow stays on the ground. Some of the monitor lizards do die, but the rest simply move into warmer places. They start turning up in greenhouses, sewers, boiler rooms, warehouses, and inside industrial buildings. Temperatures there remain high enough for them to survive, and there's still plenty of food nearby. By spring, it becomes clear that the animals haven't disappeared. Worse, some of the individuals that survived the winter have begun reproducing. The story turns into a political scandal. An investigation begins. Who authorized the mass import of the eggs? Who approved the relocation of the monitor lizards? And most importantly, why was the program allowed to continue after the first complaints from farmers? Several officials and project managers are arrested, and some get actual prison sentences. One of the people involved in launching the program, however, manages to leave Japan before charges are filed. But if the true scale of the mistake only becomes clear in the spring, until then officials can still tell themselves that they're dealing with isolated animals that simply managed to survive an unusually warm winter. Then they begin finding not the monitor lizards, but their nests full of eggs. The first eggs are discovered near industrial buildings and greenhouses where adult animals had sheltered from the cold. Then more are found in drainage systems, on vacant lots, and near landfills. The very same places where the animals had recently been deliberately relocated to control rats. That means the monitor lizards that survived the winter didn't just make it through, they'd already established a breeding population of their own. The next problem emerges far from the cities. As the monitor lizards spread across the island, they eventually reach protected areas. And there they quickly discover prey just as easy to catch as rats. They raid the nests of native birds, eat eggs and chicks, dig up turtle nests, and hunt small reptiles. For conservation agencies, this becomes a nightmare. The monitor lizards were originally brought in to control the invasive Taiwanese habu. Now the lizards are killing the very animals they were supposed to protect. After the first wave of widespread nest raids, attitudes toward them change completely. What was once a government weapon now has to be recognized as a new threat. But by this point, conservation agencies can no longer handle the problem on their own. The monitor lizards have spread across too large an area. They have to be tracked down everywhere at once, around cities, farms, landfills, and even inside nature reserves. So the government offers a bounty for every monitor lizard caught. People can bring the animals to designated collection points where they're registered and a reward is paid out. Farmers, hunters, and people who had never had anything to do with invasive species control quickly join the search. Monitor lizards are no longer hunted only where they cause problems. People start looking for them anywhere there's money to be made. But the bounty soon creates an unexpected side effect. People realize that keeping a monitor lizard alive until it can be turned in costs far less than the reward they receive for catching one. At first, of course, these are isolated cases. Someone keeps a captured female, waits for her to lay eggs, and then turns in the young animals one by one once they've grown. Before long, some people begin keeping several monitor lizards at once and breeding them specifically for the bounty. And the more animals they can raise, the more money they get from the government. Some of these supposedly captured monitor lizards have never lived in the wild at all. Once the authorities discover that people are breeding monitor lizards for the bounty, the payments are quickly canceled. But by then, dozens of private breeding operations already exist, holding adult animals in fresh clutches of eggs. Simply shutting them down makes little financial sense for their owners. The government is no longer buying the lizards, but feeding and housing them still costs money. So the breeders start looking for other customers. The easiest thing isn't to sell the adult animals, but their eggs. They take up little space, are easy to transport, and can be incubated after they reach the buyer. The first listings begin appearing online, and before long, a full-fledged black market develops, and buyers appear almost immediately. Most of the demand comes from greenhouses, warehouses, and small industrial facilities, the very same kinds of places where monitor lizards had already been used to control rats. For the owners of these facilities, this seems like a better option than constantly setting traps or using poison. All they have to do is buy a few eggs, wait for them to hatch, and release the young monitor lizards inside the enclosed property. It stays warm year-round, there are plenty of places to hide, and the rats provide the predators with a steady food supply. The black market quickly stops catering only to collectors of exotic animals. Sellers begin marketing the eggs specifically as a form of rodent control. But it's greenhouse farms that finally give the monitor lizards the environment they needed all along. It's the same story all over again. Warm temperatures year-round, a constant supply of water, countless pipes, crates, and utility rooms to hide in, and rats that keep arriving along with crops and animal feed. So the released animals don't simply remain inside, they grow, reproduce, and hide their clutches there as well. The monitor lizards no longer have to survive for months in some random boiler room or sewer system. Humans have effectively built small artificial pockets of the tropics for them, scattered all across the island. But then the problem begins spreading beyond Okinawa. Greenhouse farms start shipping their products to other parts of the country. Along with vegetables, seedlings, crates, and equipment, monitor lizard eggs in very young animals accidentally make their way into delivery trucks. Some are discovered while they're still in warehouses, others make it as far as ferries and distribution centers, and from there on to other prefectures. And while young monitor lizards can sometimes be spotted, eggs are much harder to detect. Once the shipment arrives, it often ends up in another warm facility where the clutch can continue developing undisturbed. Now authorities have to inspect not only the places where the monitor lizards are living, but the entire transportation chain leading out of Okinawa. What began as a local invasive species problem is gradually turning into a problem on the scale of an entire country's logistics network. So to stop these accidental transfers, authorities introduce inspections of greenhouse products before they leave Okinawa. Practically everything is checked: seedlings, vegetables, soil, pallets, containers, and equipment. If an egg or a young monitor lizard is found, the entire shipment is held back. The greenhouse itself is temporarily closed for inspection until specialists can confirm that there are no adult animals or additional clutches inside. And for producers, this quickly becomes a new problem of its own. A single monitor lizard hiding between a few crates can hold up the shipment of several tons of produce. That means lost time and lost money. The damage caused by the animals is no longer measured only in rats or birds they've eaten. Every new discovery becomes a blow to trade across Okinawa. The inspection soon begins slowing down normal deliveries. Trucks and containers are held up for checks. Affected farms are temporarily cut off from trade, and some shipments have to remain in storage much longer than originally planned. With fresh vegetables, even a few extra days can make a huge difference. While inspectors are checking the shipments, some of the produce starts spoiling right inside the crates and containers. In other prefectures, deliveries from Okinawa begin arriving late and in smaller quantities. Stores receive less of certain vegetables, prices start to rise, and growers are forced to throw away crops they've already harvested but can no longer get to customers in time. For the first time, the effort to control the monitor lizards begins to directly affect the food supply. But the longer the lizards remain in warehouses and greenhouses, the more serious another problem becomes. They run between crates of produce, climb onto work surfaces, and leave droppings in areas where food is later stored or prepared. After several outbreaks of intestinal infections, investigations link some of the cases directly to facilities contaminated this way. A monitor lizard near food is no longer seen as an unusual way to control rats. Now it's considered a health hazard. The rules are tightened sharply. Monitor lizards must be completely removed from warehouses, greenhouses, kitchens, and any facilities involved in food production. If one is found inside, the facility is shut down for decontamination, food from the affected area is destroyed, and operations can resume only after the site passes another inspection. The predator that businesses were deliberately buying just a few years earlier to protect food facilities is now becoming the very reason those facilities are being shut down. But once the monitor lizards are removed on a large scale, warehouses are confronted with an old problem they've almost forgotten about over the past few years. The rats come back with a vengeance. While monitor lizards were living among the containers and utility areas, they were constantly hunting rodents and preventing their populations from returning to their former levels. They were acting as a natural control on the rat population, just like predators do in the wild. But once the predator disappears, that effect vanishes in an instant. Gnawed packaging, torn open sacks, and food contaminated with droppings start appearing in warehouses again. Businesses have to bring back traps, poisons, and regular pest control treatments, while some contaminated shipments simply have to be destroyed. Costs begin to rise precisely after companies comply with government orders and get rid of the monitor lizards. For the first time, eliminating them is causing significant economic damage of its own. The monitors are being replaced by the familiar method of controlling rats. Warehouses once again begin putting out rodenticide bait on a large scale, and the amount of poison being used rises sharply within a short period of time. The rats eat the bait, but they don't always die inside the buildings. Some manage to make it outside, where they become easy prey for other predators. Weakened or already dead rodents are picked up by birds of prey, cats, and native snakes, and along with the rat, those predators ingest the poison as well. Cases of secondary poisoning begin to appear. Dead birds are found around warehouse districts, cats become sick and die, and the effects gradually spread far beyond the businesses. But the most troubling consequence appears where the whole story began, on Okinawa. After the monitor lizards disappear, rat numbers begin climbing again, and with them comes an increase in the amount of prey available to the Taiwanese habu. The snakes now have more food around warehouses, farms, drainage systems, and populated areas. Young snakes have an easier time surviving their first few months, adults can find prey more consistently, and the population begins expanding once again. Except this time, the habu is returning to an environment that is no longer the same as it used to be. Over the course of just a few years, monitor lizards spread across the area, were then systematically eradicated, rats were targeted with large amounts of poison, and some native predators were killed by secondary poisoning. The invasive snake that started this entire project in the first place is once again doing better than almost anything else. Only now it's surrounded by an ecosystem that's already taken quite a beating. Eventually, the authorities decide that local measures are no longer enough to bring the situation under control. While some regions are killing individual monitor lizards found near warehouses, others continue discovering new clutches of eggs, and shipments moving between prefectures still carry the risk of establishing yet another population. So a coordinated nationwide campaign to eradicate wild monitor lizards begins. Inspections are carried out not only on Okinawa, but in every prefecture the animals may have reached in shipments of vegetables, seedlings, or equipment. Regional authorities are instructed to search for adult lizards and egg clutches around greenhouses, warehouses, ports, and distribution centers. Traps are placed along drainage systems and around utility areas, while warm shelters where the animals might survive the winter are checked especially carefully. Any eggs that are found are destroyed before they can hatch. At the same time, the remaining illegal breeding facilities are shut down, adult monitor lizards are confiscated from breeders, and the sale of eggs is tracked. Transporting, breeding, or keeping the animals without a special permit is placed under a strict ban. At this point, the goal is no longer simply to reduce their numbers around individual businesses. The government's trying to completely eradicate an invasive population that it created in the first place, and prevent it from spreading beyond Okinawa. But at the same time, officials are forced to admit something else. When it comes to the original problem, destroying the hardest-to-reach clutches of Taiwanese habu, monitor lizards can still do the job better than people, and the authorities can no longer abandon the method entirely. In the deepest Taiwanese habu nests, hidden inside rock cavities, drainage systems, and other narrow spaces, a young monitor lizard can still do what would otherwise require a person to dismantle the entire nest. So several years later, the program is launched again. Only this time, it works very differently. Each monitor lizard egg is individually tagged and numbered, and its use is assigned in advance to one specific clutch that has been found. Once that happens, the animal can no longer simply be released back into the wild or kept after the procedure. The team places the prepared egg inside the nest, records the exact coordinates, and checks the site regularly. Once it hatches, the monitor lizard kills the young snakes, just as it did in the original experiment. But now the operation doesn't end there. A specialized team arrives afterward. Its job is to find the monitor lizard, the shelter is searched, traps are set around the area, and monitoring continues until the tagged animal is captured. And so foreign eggs are once again being slipped into even the hardest to reach snake nests. Only now, every predator that hatches from them is considered not a new inhabitant of the island, but a temporary weapon, one that must be removed, together with its tracking tag, as soon as its mission is complete. See you later.